How's everybody doing today?
Yeah.
Great.
Good.
Thanks for coming.
Awesome.
I know it's a busy conference. I'm sure you've seen a lot of great speakers today, but you chose this one. I'm really thankful you did. It's going to be a good session. We're going to talk about a really important topic that we've been through before, and my colleague here, Arvind. You want to open up the thing, or should we go?
Let's go.
Let's go. Well, you got the clicker, man. He's in charge of the clicker, so if there's any mistakes in the clicking.
That's me.
All right.
That's me.
So, when you get involved in M&A, I've been through a number of ones, very large and very small. Experian was very active in M&As. We were doing a number at the same time. You're going to find there's kind of a certain life cycle you're going to look at. And that life cycle is going to start at the annual planning for your business development group. Typically, most companies have a business development group that's looking for how do we grow through M&As. And by the way, you can be either side of that target, right? You can be the merging company, you can be the acquiring company, or the acquirer. So as you think about that, we're going to talk about when to get engaged in a cycle. Then it's going to go through a diligence period. What is diligence? It's really the sharing of information between the two companies. Because it's not just the acquiring company that's in interest here. The acquiree wants to say, is this a good partner? Is this somebody we want to work with? So it really is a two-way kind of street we've got going on here between the mergers. So they're going to start sharing information. Now, early in this process, it's going to be maybe just high-level financials, and you in the security group may not be engaged yet, all right? But as you go through this cycle, what's going to be really important, we're going to talk about in some of our scenarios here, is when to get engaged, how to get engaged. So as you go through this diligence, you're going to start sharing more about your IT infrastructures, more about the organization infrastructures. You'll probably start meeting the leadership as the business development team drives that further and further down the diligence. It's going to be critically important to understand when to engage, and that's what we'll try to illustrate today through our talks and what you're going to do during that period of the life cycle. Well, they're going to get down to the point where you're going to announce the acquisition. You sign the letter of intent, it'll become announced. This is the first time it really becomes public. Maybe some of your execs within your own organization knew, probably some at the other one, but it really now starts to become visible to not only the internal staff, but the external world as well. And you can probably understand what's going to happen at that point with the phishing and attacks surface you're going to be looking at. Then there's the most critical day you're going to run through, and that's that day of close. That's when you actually become the owner, or you become owned, depending on, again, which side of that you're in. That's the day now that all the liabilities shift to the new organization. And that's going to be a day of reckoning, because in this day is going to be when everybody wants to get data. They're all excited, they got a new toy, they want to play with it. And then finally you're going to look at, okay, I need to start my short-term integration. What do we need to do to get our systems up and running, get them compatible, and then long-term, how do we seek the synergies? Now remember, through this whole process, there's a reason, let's say you're the acquiring company, you're looking at this merger. It's because there's some benefit. They see that 1 + 1 is greater than 2. So at the end, if you don't get it integrated, you don't get some of those systems decommissioned, you won't meet that thing. Now here's why it's important for you to be here today. Because during this process, there is a lot of eyes on the process. And it's your executive team watching. If you make one wrong move, and you foul this up some way or another, I'm getting some feedback. Oh, maybe you turn this mic off. Wow, we scared this guy completely out of his chair. If you make one wrong move during this process, the executive team is going to see it, right? You disable something, you actually have disclosure or something of that nature. So it's critical you have a process you've defined gets you through here. So who makes up this team, a typical merger team and acquisition team? And this is kind of typical. Your team's probably be a little bit different. You've got your business leader. He or she is the person that's actually said, hey, we need to go out and we need to merge or acquire as part of our company growth. We need to think about this type of company. So that's what the person's kind of leading the process, if you will. There's a corporate development group that's going to say, yeah, this is how it fits into our organization. Here's where we're going to actually put it within our organization, this new target. The technology group is going to be involved and say, okay, they're cloud-based, they're not cloud, they've got this kind of mainframe, these kind of servers. What does it work? How are we going to bring these things together? Here's where the synergy makes sense. Of course, finance is really big here, because what finance is doing is looking at how do the numbers work? How are we going to make that 1 + 1 = 3? And then security, that's us. We're going to make sure that everything goes well. We're going to think about disclosure data, compliance data, all the fun stuff we get in security. The legal team, making sure we've got the right things. Now, understand, you're going to be, you as the participant in this team, one of your responsibilities is going to be briefing the team on how to interact. How are we going to share this data? Are we going to call it, ABC company, or are we going to call it by its name? Get a code name going. These are some really great practices. So if somebody actually sends an email, leaks out, they don't know who the target is, it has a code name. That's your first practice. Second one is going to be, you're going to often see a special NDA signed. First time I got it, I thought, what am I signing another NDA for? I just signed one as a new employee, right?
Right.
Now they want a special NDA. And you go, well, okay, but don't be surprised. They're going to say, no, this one really is secret. I'm going, does that mean the other one didn't really count? I don't know. It never makes sense, but I'm not a lawyer. That's really your kind of your standard team. Your business development team or your corporate side is going to depend on which org you're going to be putting that company in. So those people tend to vary. Make sure they're trained. Make sure they understand how to share this data, what the right processes are going to be as we start to share data back and forth.
So while we are working on the issue, another example of M&A, unexpected problem, right? So just there are 4 mistakes that you can make to blow up an M&A. And it's a large business transaction, right? So it's about the business synergies that are coming together. So how do you start thinking about what can go wrong? And that's where the number 1 part is being unprepared to complete the transactions. You want to make sure that we are doing all the due diligences in preparing for that big event that is coming for the entire company. Right?
Perfect. I'm back on the air.
Yep.
Can you all hear me now?
Yeah.
No wonder they weren't laughing. They couldn't even hear me. All right. So thank you. And by the way, when you do the ratings, forget that part, okay? At the end. Oh, by the way, there's rating inflation. Now a 5 is a 3. So make sure it's 5s or you weren't really here. So being unprepared, okay, I think you covered that. We're going to talk about the 4 biggest mistakes as being unprepared first. And our goal here is to give you the tools to make sure you are prepared. Taking blind risks, you're going to see a lot of that in an acquisition. I'll tell you that biz dev company, they just want to buy this group. They want to have this happen fast. Their motivation, by the way, and it's always important to understand, what's their motivation? To get the deal closed. Because that's how they get rewarded. They got the deal, they got it closed. They're going to push as quickly as possible. Because one of the true things always is time kills deals. We all know that, right? So they're going to be pushing to get this thing done. Your job is going to make sure we're doing these things the right way. And then with insufficient protection, you're going to start trying to share data really quickly before you got the right things in place. That goes back to being that prepared. Go ahead, Arthur.
Yeah. And disastrous integration. That's where it's not just about starting with the business side of it, but then also how do you start harnessing, leveraging, utilizing those synergies that begin the process of M&A in the first place itself, right?
Yep, perfect, thanks. One more click there, please. So,
all right. So, being unprepared. July 3rd, 2004, in New Jersey, Princeton, New Jersey area, and it was a warm, sunny, warm, cool evening, right? So I just went out for a sumptuous dinner with my wife. We went out for this lentil crepe stuffed with potatoes and that spicy lentil stew, right? So it was delicious. We came back home and opened the door, and we were walking down the stair, and my wife was following me. And all of a sudden, I hear from the back, hey, it's time. I was like, it's time for what? It's time for the new arrival that we've been preparing for months together, right? It's time for the new arrival and putting those things in action that we've been planning for. So that was the day, it's when you're preparing for a new family member's arrival, having an M&A is exactly that moment. You run as a family and you're inviting another family member to come join you on that journey. So we prepare so much for a new arrival at home. How do we prepare for the new arrival in the business side of it, right? And that's where the very first thing we do is, we want to keep the information confidential, but that leads to many gotchas, and one of those is having unexpected problems. Right? So if you're not prepared, things can go wrong. And how do you address them? Just like with family, we go to the experts, we go to the specialists, and we engage and we start working with them. That's what we need to start doing in the M&A too. Bring in the expert, the cybersecurity guys. They're there to help you. And as James was pointing out early on, it's getting that seat on the table is super critical.
Yeah, I think, one of my experience here, the business development team, they do have this, I want to keep it secret till they're ready to release it. What you need to do as security leader and security person is gain their trust. Have them see they can trust you with the information, that you're actually going to be an asset to them as you go forward. Because otherwise, they're not going to tell you until the deal's signed, right? And last time you want to know is the day the deal's signed, because now you've got something you own you're not ready for. So you need to set out, as you get back to the office, figure out who this business development people are, sit down with them, meet them, tell them how you work and why it's so important to have you engage very early in the process. Maybe not when they're just doing the book reviews, but as soon as they actually start really engaging information.
Right. And that's where the second part that needs to happen, once you have the seat on the table, you have the specialist looking at things, you begin those early questions. And those questions could be crucial, right? And they could be really simple as, hey, did you ever had a incident? Or did you ever had a security event? Did you ever had a breach? And that one simple question early in the stage could be worth $300 million on the cost of an acquisition. This is a real life example that has happened before. A large corporation, working through a M&A, the CISO was very visionary and powerful, just went in and she asked the right question and bang, $300 million. Why? Because they had a breach of customers' data. They had millions and millions of records that were broken. But those conversations, could they have ever been uncovered had the security not been engaged early and had that seat on the table? This is very critical.
Sure.
So you're just moving on. That's the minimal due diligence that you start with, having these simple questions to begin with. And then you start talking about what's happening in the security incident space, right? You start having broader questions around what kind of teams do you have? What kind of structure do you have? And in our experiences, depending on the size of acquisition, you could have that team of 2 or 3 people wearing multiple hats. They're acting the role of the IT practitioner, they're acting the role of managing the infrastructure, and they're also trying to wear the hat of security practitioner. And on the other hand, you could run into an acquisition where you have a full-fledged organization out there. And when you start talking about the basic processes, do they exist or not? Just having those initial conversations will uncover and give you the level of maturity of the acquisitions or the company you're merging with. And then, of course, you start talking about what kind of technologies and controls you have in place. So you start looking at the scope of the organization from the endpoint side, from the network sides, the development of codes. If you're working with a technology firm, you will see a lot of development work being done. And then you know which path you want to go on. What is the business risk? What are the applications running? What are the exposed services out there? And then if you have a large manufacturing unit or other places, that's where you go in the direction of, hey, how are we looking at OT? The OT networks versus IT networks, the manufacturing plants and operations. So,
yeah, I just want to bring a dose of reality here. We want all these questions, and we want them all answered, right? because we want to give back the company an idea what the merger is going to cost them after you bring them in to sync them with yours. The reality, though, is in the beginning, they don't even have a security person on their side involved. May not even have a CIO engaged yet. Could be just their biz team talking to this team. So this is going to kind of come a little bit at a time as you get further and further down that due diligence line. It probably won't be your first contact with them. You know, CEO maybe, and maybe their CFO is engaged, depending on the size and complexity of the target company. Yeah. So that's just a little bit of reality, but don't give up. Keep pushing, because until that line's signed, you've got the chance for that clawback that you want to do. Okay?
Yeah. And with that, you know, so you're going through the stage where you're being engaged, we are asking the right questions, and then the news is communicated across the organization. So what's the first reaction when these deals happen? You know, the human instinct is the fight or flight, right? Stay or go. So if there's a fight or stay, you know, we're good. We have good people who are going to support and continue on this journey with us. Yes, there'll be ups and downs, but we're going to walk along. But there will be people who will feel like, oh, it's time to go, or let's fly away, right? So how do you make sure the very essence of the merger, let's say if you're in a sales organization, how do you make sure your sensitive data, intellectual property, the PIIs that you may be storing, the pricing information that you may have, the prospective customers' databases that you have, how do you secure all of those pieces? And that's where, you know, the creative thinking around what should we focus on? You know, if we are into manufacturing industries, we are looking at the intellectual property, the designs and the systems that we have. If we are more into technology side of it, we are focused on where is our code sitting, where our business services are being delivered, and how do we secure them? Who are the key talent to look at that part? So that's where, you know, you start on the journey of going through some people at different level, they're going to fly away. So how do you make sure, you know, you are able to monitor and minimize or contain any impact that flight response may have? And that's where you start looking at, hey, you know, I have an experience where a very senior leader in the organization, as soon as the news got out, we saw a large number of data leaving the organization. And as you zero into those data leaving the organization, you identify the individuals who are leaving. And if they are in a certain department, you know, you want to quickly alert and take action. And we were fortunate enough, we had those capabilities and controls to quickly look at that data and contain that part and engage legal, engage HR, and immediately take action within 4-hour time. But had we not looked at that part of it, you know, some of the very sensitive data could have gone out and could have impacted the outcome of the M&A. So that's another part to look at.
Before you go ahead. So, you know, as you think about this part, you know, we're thinking about data movement. Why is insider threat at an all-time high right now?
Yeah.
Let me just ask, what are some of the things that are happening that might be driving your insider threat level up, besides M&A? You know, we've got an economic recession, right?
Yeah.
Pending. We've got the Great Resignation, right? Folks that are now working remote and being asked maybe to go back to the office. All these things, by the way, create uncertainty. And that uncertainty is what people get uncomfortable with. So this is when they start packing this data. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But your user analytics is going to tell you when you see these behaviors, because this is about being prepared, right? You got to make sure you have the right process and technology in place with the right people that can manage those technologies to be able to be prepared, right?
Correct.
All right.
Yeah. And it's like any journey, you know, you could be starting on that journey. So you had those conversations with the team on the other side of the aisle. You started introductions with the CTO, CIOs. You learned about the technology landscape. You looked at the data pieces. You looked at what matters most to the business. And then what comes next, you know? So you think you have a plan, you think you know which direction we need to work. But as in life, we got to prepare for unexpected.
So let me, I'll pick up this one. So, as you're thinking about your risk assessment, you started earlier in the process. Now it's time to start, as you're moving down this process, start asking more and more questions about what's going on. And your goal here is not only, as Arvind said, understand whether they've already had an incident, what's your security posture look like compared to theirs? How risk adverse is your company as compared to the other ones? Remember, you're dealing with two cultures here too. Yeah. And they may be very different cultures. And you got to understand that, because why? In the end, when they do the financial report to get the board to sign off, they're going to say, hey, we're going to spend this much money and we're going to get this much return. That's that 1 + 1 = 3. Well, if you haven't considered you've got to put $10 million in to bring their security practices up to equal to yours, well, guess what? One, you're in the security group, you're going to be fighting for the next 3 years to try to get that money to do those investments. Better solution here, better idea, better way to go is get that in the due diligence so that money is set aside for you. It can be set aside either in your fund or it can be a clawback from the actual transaction. I see clawbacks. Are you familiar with that term, clawback? Yeah, it just means you're setting some money as part of the transaction that they're actually paying because you made the argument they should have invested this. They didn't make those investments to make their books look better, and now they need to make those investments as part of the transaction.
Yeah, and that's a great point, James. Just going back to the earlier $300 million example, you not only saved on the transaction, but you also worked with your legal team to prepare for contingencies. If things get out, if there's a remediation required, X number of dollars are reserved and the language is incorporated into the contract to protect the fund from that part. And just like in life, we prepare for those who have kids, we prepare for their future education plans, open 529s and get the health insurance for unexpected changes. It's the same thing with M&A. We got to prepare, we got to assess the risk and prepare for those contingencies in place.
Well, it's like my experience with my daughters in college. Yeah. I wasn't prepared enough. Man, it's expensive. All right, so we kind of went through that mistake one. And the second theme is the second mistake that can be made is taking these blind risks and what can happen here. So go ahead and we'll bring up the first scenario. As you think about the first scenario, by the way, this was me this morning on the phone with my daughter. She's looking at grad school for next year. Sensitive data, is going to be shared back and forth, and you're going to start seeing all kinds of data as they're doing this. Well, normally you set up a data room. Well, I had an experience. We were buying a $7 billion transaction, and I had briefed, as I talked earlier, I met with a team that was part of the M&A, and HR was part of the team. And I said, hey, listen, we need to be careful how we're sending sensitive data. Only use the data room. Don't mail anything straight to them. And what happens 2 days later? I get on my alerts the full list of our entire employee list. The employees, their socials, their kids' names, their salaries, everything. I went to see her, I go, what are you doing? She goes, oh, I wasn't mailing it to the target. I was mailing it to our benefits people so they knew what the change was going to be. I said, and my head's kind of exploding at this point. And she goes, oh, well, nobody would see it. I just sent it just to her. Yeah. And I go, well, no. You can say, well, how would they see it? I go, exactly the way I caught it, is they can capture this stuff. So it was kind of that re-education. Fortunately, we had the right tool in place that didn't allow it to go out. Right. But think about it, and by the way, I was kind of getting the shift off, oh, it's not a big deal, until I said, our CEO would be interested to know that everybody else knows his salary, his kid's name, social. That's when they got serious about it, because they realized that if I shared the story with the CEO, they were going to be in big trouble. So training your staff on using DLP and some of these different processes we have to capture and stop that data. Doesn't do any good to know it happened. You got to prevent it from going out. Yeah. Anything you want to add to that, Arvind?
No, I think I love the part you said, hey, nobody will see it, right? Once you send it by email, it's gone.
Just in their email
cloud,
box.
Right?
All right, so go ahead and click through. So as you think about, you're going to start now, you're getting a little bit deeper in the process. One of the key things is people are in hybrid modes these days, right? Most organizations, a mix of cloud and on-prem. Look at what cloud instances they have. Because where's the number one breach in Verizon's toll? It's human error, right? S3 bucket being left open, something like that. So you're going to want to compare configurations. You're going to want to know what they have out there and where that data resides. I always think about the 3 R's when I'm working with any company. What are the 3 R's? Where does revenue come from? Why are we buying this company? Why is it this is company? And I think Arvind mentioned it earlier. Is it because they have great manufacturing? Is it processes? Is it their IP? Is it their customer base? What is it we're buying? Because that's what you got to have to protect as it goes through. What would ruin them? Would a breach ruin them? Would a disclosure of this data, would their customers pull out if they knew they were being acquired? So what is that second R? And then finally, what regulations? We're going to talk a little bit more about compliance and regs, how that kind of fits in here. But all of us have a reg. I don't care what industry you're in. There's some regulation you've got to worry about when it comes to privacy.
Yep. And
go ahead. Yes, sir.
So, as we are looking at the arrival of the new member in the company, the next part comes in is how do you prepare for it? How do you integrate them with yourself, right? So as soon as the M&A happens, as James mentioned, there are synergies, there are 3 R's, and there are promises that are made on the street. So everybody's like, hey, here's the day of integration. Let's quickly bring all the systems together and start integrating them. But the critical part there is, how do you integrate them? Do you truly understand what data is sitting out there in what form? And how do you give access to it, right away? So without having a contextual information, without understanding systems, there could be a driver for, hey, we need access to this, let's go for it. But how do you bring it across the companies? What systems, who's going to have the access? What is the form of data? Is it protected or not? Those are the questions that needs to be asked about before taking that blind risk. And there has been cases, it's in this tech merger, we had certain applications serving the clients externally, and they were pushed for, hey, we want this type of codes to be moved in this manner very quickly. And eventually that resulted in a big outage. And there's a saying, you want to go slow to go fast. So that's an example. You want to think about where you want to move, how you want to go before you start, distributing the data, make sure it is protected.
I think this is your second biggest pressure you're going to have. First one is, how do I understand the financial impact of what my responsible area is? And second, they're eager to go, and are you ready to go? And what kind of disruption might you cause in either company as you're getting through here?
Yep. Thank you, James. So with that comes the part of integration. Normally when you work with an organization, the very first thing that you start talking about is the email system. That's where you have the entire business, entire technology organization, and even the external people, the customers, the vendors, the partners. How are we going to communicate with the new firm or with this M&A? So we've been part of M&As where it's fairly simple. One organization is too large, and all of a sudden, hey, we're going to bring those people in. And of course, there are complexities around, you can't just create a new account and they become part of your emails, right? So there has to be association with Active Directories and their backend system that needs to be worked in. And then there are other companies where the brand of the firm is so powerful that the messaging has to be combined. So I was part of Towers Watson, the number one benefit consulting management firm. And then we merged with Willis, one of the top 3 reinsurance broker in the world. And instead of having separate domains, we just decided to create a brand new domain and bring in the email infrastructure together, right? But that alone, just thinking about from the integration perspective, it just doesn't stop at your email systems, right? So your email systems require IDs. The IDs require Active Directories. And in one cases, we had 7 Active Directory instances in the organization that we acquired. How do you bring those 7 different Active Directory domains into one? So that could be another challenge, but what people don't realize is it goes beyond that. Those Active Directory identities, they are being used by the developers as well. They also host data for applications and their access. So it's not as simple as, hey, just consolidate the Active Directory, but what are the dependencies, the DNS systems, the applications that are being supported through those identities, and the systems and services that are running on those, they need to be considered, engaged, and validated as well.
You know, this is a really important topic right now because now we're kind of in that post-acquisition. We're trying to now get some of those synergies that we were expecting to get. And one of the things you're going to run into is that duplicate product, right? We both got Power BI, or one's got Power BI, another one's got, you know, whatever Power BI's competitor is. How are you going to merge those together? CIO's got a problem. They need to get these licenses reduced. This idea of coaching comes in real important because one, you will be able to tell them, hey, this is how many users you've got doing this, how many users you're using that. Guess what? They love you because you can tell them how many licenses are actually being used because they don't know, right?
Right.
In the acquisition time. Another thing you can do in the coaching thing is tell everybody you're sunsetting X product. Because you know what? I don't know about you, but I've sent out 100 emails saying, hey, on April 30th, we're going to discontinue this product. Here's where we get the training on the new one. Get signed up. April 30th is shut it off. April 31st, is it 31 days in April? I don't think so. Let's go with May 1st.
30.
You know, that they all call you and say, oh, I didn't know. Well, if you use this coaching kind of technologies, then you can say, well, wait a minute, you were told 27 times. And each time we gave you the thing and you said, okay, I'm going to get it done, because you make them respond. So it's a really great way to make friends with your CIO and your tech groups. All right? All right, so we're going into our last scenario here. And you know, we've hit some really key things. Perfect. So as we think about this last scenario and what's going to go through, it's now around the protection of the data. So let's talk about this one a little bit. So go ahead. So as we think about this, again, this might have been when she told me how much it was cost this morning. So, you know, there's no accurate inventories. That's one of the problems you're going to run into. Depending on the maturity of the two companies, is do they have an inventory there? How do you identify risk if you don't know what it is, right? So you're going to have to start running discovery. That's the kind of gotcha. Can't manage risk you don't know about. So you're going to have to start running some discovery tools. Run their logs through the discovery tools. They'll start giving you this inventory. That'll give you the ability to actually see what you're going to manage. Now, I'd love to get this before close date. How often can you get that acquiring company to send you their logs before you're owned? I'd say it's almost zero. They're not going to send you logs. They're not going to send you that kind of data until you've actually signed on the bottom line.
Yep. Yeah, and inventory, I think that's a great point, James. You know, you always want to focus on getting the big picture first, and inventory is a good step in that direction. But then you have to balance, you know, as an acquiree, we also ask ourselves, how good is our own inventory? You know, so the larger the organization gets, the harder it becomes. And of course, you know, depending on size, inventory could be anywhere from Excel files going to the expensive solutions. But the quality of the data, you know, that's where the real challenge that you're going to face on. So the opportunity there is, hey, let's start with a baby step. Let's go into a high-risk scenario. What do we really care about? And let's start and funnel down from there.
One more point before we go to the next slide. When we talk about inventory, do we know what third parties they're using? What third parties you're going to know? Don't forget your third parties. They need to know at some point this acquisition is occurring, right? Yeah. And you need to understand where those, because that's part of your risk scenario. So get a good inventory of what third parties are using. Compare that list. Hopefully you have a lot of synergies. You're using the same vendors, start consolidating those contracts. But think about the risk side of this. You don't know you're using this one. Maybe they're even using a competitor. I've had that happen, where one of their products is actually competitors of ours. kind of gets a little embarrassing, a little uncomfortable. Go ahead,
Right.
Nick, Sarah. So, as we think about this area of insufficient protection, this is a time of change. It's going to become public. Every time you sign up for HR benefits, what happens? You start seeing the phishing, you start seeing the tax. You've got a tax coming. You've got people uncomfortable. We talked about that third party. They're going to start trying to pack that data and move it out because they don't know if they're going to be considered redundant or not, but they want to be ready for it, right? So a lot of changes going on here. A lot of data is moving around. Huge attack surface change, right? We've got a huge change in our attack surface. So now, by the way, right about, let's say just before close, but it's imminent, you should start syncing your incident response plans at some very early on. You want to kind of talk about it with the teams because what happens if during this process we do have a disclosure? You got two companies' reputations on the line. If you throw them under the bus, they throw you under the bus, not going to be good. So you want to be able to sync that incident response plan. So what's PR communications, right? Big part of that. The legal groups need to engage. So think about that as part of your process as you get down into this. How would we handle an incident if it occurred right during this? Until we can get our security teams merged up, what are we going to do? How's that going to work?
Yeah.
So, as we think about these risky behaviors, what are risky behaviors? That packing I talked about. It's that sending of sensitive information. It's they're out shopping for a new job. We had actually a head of procurement at one of the large organizations you heard in my bio actually walk out of the office with a box of contracts. This was physical. It wasn't like in a thumb drive. They held the door open for them. Well, if you go, I don't want to use companies' names, but you can imagine they went to the competitor, and this is a manufacturing company. If you already know what that company got as a deal from Delphi, guess what your starting point is?
Yeah.
What a competitive advantage. So this is sort of things that will happen during these acquisitions. People pack stuff, it's their toolbox. They own it. They don't own it, you got to protect it. It's an asset, right? So think about that in these risky behaviors and how you can spot that. Education's a big part. Make sure they understand you don't own it. That person that wrote that code, that parsing routine, they want to take it out because it was a lot of work. You got to inform them, no, that's a business asset. You can't take it with you. Be very careful. Put the guardrails out. Protect them from themselves.
Yeah, protect them from themselves.
Right.
That's the key part, right? So with that, we start thinking about what's the takeaway. The first part is in the first 30 days, today, there's a lot that you can do without the other company even knowing or with the permission of other company in just first 30 days. Unlike when we had data centers or unlike when we were buying licenses, installing and deploying solution, there are SaaS services that you can start off with right away. There are services you can start from third-party risk management side. You can look at the external posture of the company right away. Use that. It takes not more than 1 day. There are attack surface management solutions, SaaS services. Again, get that initial discussion and map out that external attack surface. In our home, we have one door. In my home, we have one front door and we keep it protected and secure. So why should it be any different for other organizations, right? Why would you leave multiple security defects, vulnerabilities as your multiple doors and windows? So you can get that right out of the door, right? And have those discussions. Ask that important question about what kind of security events that have gone through, the incidents, the breaches, and the other part. So very simple, very quick takeaways. Within 30 days, you can get there. And then as you move into the first 90 days, that's where you begin the journey on the people, process, and technology side. You wouldn't come to know everything, but you will have a fairly good idea with what are you dealing with. On the people side, you will know the organization size. You will have a feeling for skill gap that you need to deal with. On the processes side, What's their incident response process? Do they have retainers with companies? They have to use those processes? You can do external pen testing very quickly and see the external postures as well. And then as you pass through the 90 days, prepare for those changing priorities, because you are going to find things that you never expected or prepared for. And with that, hopefully these actions will help you prepare for your new arrival. And then, of course, there'll be ups and downs, and there'll be highs and lows. But the journey is going, putting all these steps together will make the journey a little more easier for everybody. So with that, thank you so much.
Yeah, I just want to add hang on, just add a couple of thoughts there. When you think about what we've talked about today, what were some of the key points? Actually, I'll ask you a quick question. What is your measure of success from your leadership? What are they going to look for you for? What is how have you know you've been successful when this merger's done? You're going to be able, they'll know how much money it's going to cost to bring parallel to your security program, right? You've got those financials, you've made them aware of them. Of course, they've set the budget aside, I love. It went smooth. You were able to integrate the two systems, get them up and running. You set expectations so that day one came and they wanted to share financial systems and want to log into Salesforce or Workday or whatever you're working. They were able to do it. Or they knew exactly when you'd be able to enable those functions. If you've got those things, you've been successful. Think about some of the key things we brought up today. Think about your incident response plans so you're prepared. Think about this diligence process and how it escalates up. You get a little bit of data first, you keep driving, get more and more data so you can do that cost analysis for them. And of course, think about your compliance requirements, because you might be you're really used to doing global type data. They may not be. They may be less matured and don't want to violate the law the first day you get going as you start sharing data. So with that, I want to say thank you as well to my co-speaker here. I love speaking with Arvind, and I loved having you as an audience today. Thank you.
It was great to have you guys.
I should have let him applaud the first time. We could have gotten 2 applauses.
I know. That was a great idea.
Make sure you fill out your evaluations. Remember, there is 5 stars, and we have time for Q&A. If you have a question,
I have more of a comment than a question, but one thing to also keep in mind in the M&A process, particularly between when you've announced the deal and before you've closed, don't forget about that kind of M&A side channel attack of business email compromise. You're going to be transferring a boatload of money at some point in time. Right. If you don't have controls in place to ensure that money goes to the right spot, you could be in a world of hurt.
Yeah, that would be really bad. You paid the wrong company. Yeah, great point. Great point. Yeah, the CFO might be a little excited. Other questions, guys? We've got, I think, about 5 minutes left or so, right? Time-wise. And if you're not comfortable on the mic, we're going to hang around here for a few minutes. Please come and see us. We'd love to talk about this stuff.
Absolutely. That was a great point. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you. All right, see you guys later.
Thank you, guys.
Have a great show. Great weather. Thanks, San Francisco.